made by Michael and Johann Heim and a team of leading scientists show that the Sumerians and even the Egyptians inherited all their knowledge from an earlier civilization that lived at the southern tip of Africa more than 200,000 years ago, mining gold. These were also the people who carved the first forest bird, the first sphinx, built the first pyramids, and built an accurate stone calendar right in the heart of it all. Adam's calendar is the flagship among millions of circular stone ruins, ancient roads, agricultural terraces, and thousands of ancient mines left behind by a vanished civilization, which we now call the first people. Now, if y'all want to know a little bit more about Michael, you can go to his website, www.zuluplanet.com, and that's ZULUPLANET.com. Michael, how you doing tonight? Actually, today.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much, Royce. Nice to be talking to you finally.
Yeah,
after a few hiccups, yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of crossed each other a couple of times.
Yeah.
Well,
it's 8 o'clock in the evening for me here in South Africa, and I just had to put one of my favorite rugby games on hold to talk to you and your listeners. So I'm really devastated that I can't watch my favorite team play in what is in South Africa a really big humdinger rugby game.
Oh, well, I do apologize for that. I didn't know you had a rugby game at the time we scheduled this.
Yeah, no, I just since you guys don't play much rugby up there, I thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, actually, to be honest with you, until I interviewed Tim Wallace-Murphy, I never heard of rugby. So
strangely enough, Canada, strangely enough, actually has a reasonably good rugby team. They do quite well in the World Cups. They hold their own. It's really interesting, actually.
I might check into that and see more about it. But in the meantime, now, I got to tell you, you and me, we both have an interest in a similar field, and we both have a common acquaintance. I actually heard about you from William James, the author of 0 Point Energy, Power of the Gods. I think you and him were friends and correspondents, and ever since he's been on my show, I've been trying to get a hold of you. So it's been a hard road for me to toe because you're always out in the field doing your research out, where you're not near a phone or a computer or anything, so you're hard to reach.
Yeah, it's been really hectic the last 2 years since we've made these discoveries, and specifically myself. It's pretty much been me on my own with every now and then I'll pull in somebody who's expert in their field, a scientist in some area, whether it's a geologist or a I don't know, nuclear physicist or whatever, trying to get some feedback from them, and so it's been it's felt like a roller coaster ride the last 2 years. It's been incredible.
Oh, I can imagine it has. I imagine it's been pretty rough on you being out in the wilds there where it's hot and humid and muggy and you got all the insect kingdom with you, and it's not exactly a glamour job, but it's I think a well worth job when you make a big discovery like this one.
It certainly is, and I think that it's really only starting to dawn upon me now what it is that we've discovered or that I have discovered and the conclusions that I've reached. It's exciting. It's like it really is an adventure. Every day is an adventure at this stage.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that you used the term first people, and I know that the Egyptians had a term called Zep Tepi, first time. So I'm taking it, you put it together that when they referred to Zep Tepi, they're referring back to the time when these people were mining the gold, maybe?
I think there's possibly a link there. And as soon as you start looking into it and researching it and analyzing it, all these things are inextricably linked. Everything is connected. It's just the timeline and where in the timeline it fits. What I can tell you is that there's no doubt that the civilization that lived here used exactly the same symbols as the Sumerians and the Egyptians. And you know, this is a big shock to most people when they first find it. It was a shock to me. I couldn't believe it. When you discover an ankh carved out into rock in South Africa, and the rock is extremely hard, with the erosion showing us that we're dealing with something that is extremely old. I'm talking about, you know, way beyond 100,000 years. So it way predates the Egyptian civilization.
Wow.
And then the Sumerian, you know, crosses in circles and the winged discs, the very early, very basic kind of winged disc with the circle and the cross with a three lines coming out of it. All those are petroglyphs in rock here that are extremely old, judging from the cracks and the erosion in the rocks and through the actual petroglyphs themselves. And much of it is also overgrown by what is referred in geology as patina, which is like the skin of a rock when the rock breaks. It exposes the internal fresh.
Kind of like the aftermath in an egg. When you crack an egg, you got that thin film.
Yeah, well, the patina then grows around, once it breaks, it starts to grow. And so the patina, the thickness of the patina is a reasonably good indicator of the age of the tools and the artifacts and the petroglyphs and the carvings, if it grows around it. And so it's really very interesting. It's like a Sherlock Holmes kind of job, a CSI. I often refer to it as my job is really the same as the guys at CSI. You know, I follow the clues and the evidence, and based on the clues and the evidence, I then formulate my theories and voice my opinions.
Right. And one of the things that you were mentioning just a minute ago that I couldn't help but pick up on was when you mentioned the cross. Well, actually, you called it the ankh, but I've done some study on the internet and in books, and well, as you know, I talked to various authors, etc. And one of the things that's come to my attention is that the cross has its origin in the ankh and goes back all the way to Egypt. But what you just indicated to me is that it goes back much, much, much further than Egypt or Samaria or Babylon or any of that.
Oh yeah, no, it goes back a long time ago. I'm talking about more than 100,000 years, 200,000 years, probably even older.
So actually, the winged disc and the cross are likely to be two of the very oldest symbols we've got, maybe?
Yeah, well, it's together with the ankh, together with the zigzag shape. It's often referred to as a sign for water or energy, and many of these shapes. There are some very interesting shapes that I found that look like almost Chinese letters. But slightly different, if you know what I mean. It's probably the best description. In my book, Temples of the African Gods, I show all this stuff in very nice, colorful detail. And these things are extremely old. It's not something that was done a few thousand years ago. It goes way back before that.
Yes, and I think, now, when I first heard about you in this here civilization, when I got the notice from William James on it, at that point in time, I had the impression that you were thinking that this was perhaps, and I could be wrong, but you were thinking that this civilization you found could have perhaps been part of Enki's Abu's?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. This is the physical evidence and the physical proof that Zechariah Sitchin has been probably hoping for and looking for all his life, and that most historians and scholars of the Sumerian tablets, for those that obviously believe that there's merit in it, historic merit, because there's still many scholars that believe the Sumerian tablets are just, mythological stories that have no real historic value. And that's just a shocker, you know. It's just unbelievable that somebody can still think that.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I think that's a bunch of malarkey when people say that, because what these people are saying is the Bible's not mythology, but these other texts are.
Yeah, exactly. And everything in the Bible comes from the Sumerian tablets. It's just an edited version of what we find in the Sumerian tablets. And the other thing that I find, absolutely laughable is our academics today, and not all of them, but many of them, will want to suggest to us that the people that first started writing, the Sumerians, well, they weren't the first people that started writing. There were other scripts that are older than the Sumerian script, but we haven't deciphered it, and we haven't found substantial amounts of those other scripts. But the Sumerians that started writing in large volumes, and I mean millions of clay tablets, millions and millions of clay tablets that they've written. They wrote everything down. I mean, the National Geographic writes an amazing introduction about the Sumerians, about how they wrote. They just wrote everything down. They accounted for. They were the guys that taught us everything we know today, from the legal system, the monetary systems, the agriculture, architecture. What do you call it? Music,
right.
Cooking.
And like a civilization that just sprung up overnight,
exactly.
According to Sitchin's description.
And some of these historians will want to make us believe that these guys that started writing everything down just wrote down a bunch of crap. They didn't write down a single thing of value. They just made everything up. It's a spectacularly arrogant and egotistical assumption to make.
Yeah, it really is. And just because it doesn't agree with the status quo, I mean, if we went by the status quo, we wouldn't have had the Wright brothers or the airplane.
Well, exactly. So, enough of that. The point is that the discoveries we've made here, and these are not new discoveries. It's important that I just stress that. It's not something I discovered. And we must come back. We must definitely come back to the origins of the interest in these ruins in South Africa, because that's a fascinating tale in itself. But the fact that I've really taken a different kind of keen interest in this and analyzed it and deciphered what these stone ruins are all about. I've proposed a theory, and now the scientific research that we are applying to it is overwhelmingly supports the theories and the ideas that are put forward. And this is what all these scholars like Zechariah Sitchin and people that have been talking about the Sumerians, they've been looking for this for decades and decades. So this is why I believe it's such a huge breakthrough. It provides the physical evidence that the Annunaki were very active in southern Africa. They set up millions of gold mines. They set up a huge civilization with more than 10 million stone structures that we've discovered.
Golly.
And it is the largest and the most mysterious, vanished ancient civilization anywhere on Earth. And it is the primordial settlement of human beings in the Abzu, as the Sumerian tablets refer to it, in great detail all the time, in the Abzu where the gold came from. And what... sorry, Royce, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize for that. I was just thinking that with all that many monoliths and structures around, I know that it was a habit back then to engrave a lot of things on these walls. I would think you're probably still deciphering things that are etched in stone, aren't you?
Well, that's the interesting thing. We're dealing with a completely different mindset, completely different, very primordial early civilization with different habits, different lifestyle. It's absolute slavery. It is what my book, Slave Species of God, insinuates. It is the slave species in their very early days, with very little consciousness, with no knowledge whatsoever of anything. They were pretty much like empty shells with a seed of consciousness in it that slowly but surely started to evolve over 300,000 years to where we are today. With the rise and fall of knowledge and information over cycles, as we know, the coming and going of other great civilizations like Atlantis and so forth, but this particular civilizations like Atlantis and so forth, but this particular civilization in southern Africa was the slave species, the Lulu Amelu, as the Sumerians called it, and as Sitchin points out, the primitive worker that they refer to. And that's why, when you say we're deciphering a lot of things, there is so much here that is just so completely different to anywhere else. And yet there is also so much that links this civilization to all the other Northern Hemisphere civilizations and the Mesoamericans, the Andean and the Peruvian and the Mexican civilizations, and even the Chinese and the Hindu and the Dravidian civilizations. You can find links to pretty much every ancient civilization that we know about. You can find links to them here in South Africa.
So it's like they were all bunched together in one location and spread out from there.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. But then there's also overwhelming evidence that they came back. You know, that there were Hindus here, Hindu Dravidians that were mining gold and trading with gold up to about 2000 BC. The Romans were here. The Egyptians were here. The Phoenicians were here. The Chinese were here. It just goes on and on. It's spectacular.
So your book, Temple of the African Gods, will describe the kind of clues that you found that tells you how you knew the Romans and the other people were there, and how you knew their state of intellect at the time. I'm pretty sure they had probably stone tools or something that you found laying around or something.
Yeah, well, that is, now you're really pushing the right buttons.
Well, I don't mean to push the wrong button. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that for you to be able to say that these people were not highly intelligent, you would probably need to find something in the, discoveries, artifacts that would indicate that they hadn't had a high technology like stone tools or something. Yet you knew there had to be a higher technology guiding them because you had Adam's calendar and all these other structures. So kind of like showing the difference between a higher intelligence guiding a lower intelligence.
Exactly. See, now, a very good example of that, because what we're finding is knowledge of advanced technology, using the laws of nature and the laws of sacred geometry, and applying it at its absolute perfection, and we must come back to that as well, finding the stone tools and the stone artifacts and that they use that I've now deciphered, realizing that they understood the concept of the generation of energy and using sound and frequency as a source of energy. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I'll tell you about that as well because of the measurements that we've made. We've made spectacular electronic measurements that are just so mind-blowing that this is still going to really shake the tree of interest, I believe, because we've measured frequencies and energies that are higher than anything else we use on Earth today.
Wow.
Way, way, way higher. Way higher.
Sounds like something that could also be very destructive.
Exactly. It's in fact, there's a very interesting situation that happened is when I first put this theory together and I realized that they had the knowledge of technology. And once again, we need to separate, because you mentioned that it was a primitive species that had the guidance of higher intelligence. So that's exactly what we're dealing with here. So the Annunaki, who had the knowledge and the technology that basically instructed and taught these early humans how to use it, how to use the tools, how to apply it, what to do, and so forth. But the frequencies that we measured are just spectacular. If you look at the mining industry today, right? So you got the miners that work in the mines. The owners of the gold mines that own Anglo-American and Rio Tinto and the big mining companies in the world, where do you think the owners live? They don't live at the mines. They don't live on the mines. They live in their crystal palaces in London or in New York or wherever, right?
Right. They got the workers out there actually get the back-breaking labor.
Yeah, and what happens to the workers? The workers get taught and trained how to use the tools. Do you think if you ask a miner underground, how does the drill that he uses work, or how does the technology, whatever tools they use, how does it work? Where does it get manufactured? They have no clue. They don't understand how it works. They just know it works. They know you push this button and you do this with this tool. You pick up that tool, you do something else with it, and it works in the following way. So they're trying to use the tools. But if you ask them to replicate those tools and make them work, they're not going to be able to do that. And this is really a fascinating thing, right? So we find what are the oldest, probably the oldest tools used by ancient humans of advanced technology. And these tools were basically laser beams, as weird and wacky as this may sound. It was laser technology and frequency-driven technology.
Now, did you find an actual laser beam tool, or was it the rock that you could tell was cut by laser technology?
No, it's the tools that we find that, from a scientific and an electronic perspective, the only thing that these things could possibly use is something like what I'm describing. Otherwise, it makes absolutely no sense. And in fact, those tools of technology still being used today in various fields of electronics. So all you need to do is just have enough information about what's going on in the world today, and you realize that these guys were doing it 200,000-300,000 years ago, using the same technology, but actually having a much better understanding of the fundamental energy fields that drive this technology. Okay, and we, I go through this in reasonable detail in my presentations. So hopefully the people that are more interested in this will come to some of my talks on my USA and Canadian tour, and have a look at the evidence and the facts and the measurements and the statistics and so forth.
I would like to go to one of your tours. You going to be in Houston anywhere?
Yeah, we're going to be in Austin and in Dallas.
So close.
Yeah, I know. We tried to do it in Houston, but unfortunately, the venue that we had lined up was just too big and too expensive for this tour. But we'll do it. We'll do Houston next time. We'll definitely do Houston next time.
Good. I'd like to see some of this material myself because it sounds very fascinating.
Royce, the people that are interested in the cities and the venues I'm going to be in, just go to ZuluPlanet.com and click on the banner for the USA tour, and it'll take you to the webpage, to the blog spot that's got all the details on. And or you can just go to michaeltellinger.blogspot.com or ZuluPlanet.com.
And I think you got another website called slavespecies.com, don't you?
Yeah, slavespecies.com. That was my original website after I released Slave Species of God. And you know what I find fascinating is that wherever I go in the world and I do these presentations and I share this information, I also get people that share the information with me. So I learn wherever I go. It's absolutely fascinating when you start realizing that the consciousness is just rising so rapidly around this planet at the moment, and people are just plugging into the same source of energetic source of understanding and unity, and realizing that we all have a bit of information that we can throw into the pot. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I see more and more people are getting more and more interested in ancient mysteries all the time. When I first got on the internet back in, oh my goodness, 20 years ago or whatever it was, whenever it first come out, I'm not good with time, but I'm just saying when I first got into it, it just wasn't that well known at the time, except for some of the works of Donican and some of the works of Sitchin. But you look out there now, and there's scads of authors and researchers and scientists and, all kinds of people that have been discovering a lot about it.
Yeah. And once you get on a roll, it truly becomes a roller coaster ride. That's what's happening to me right now. Is just once you've got enough information and enough pieces of the puzzle, it is a lot easier to identify the new pieces of the puzzle that you find, how they fit into the greater picture. And that's why it's a slow, tedious process in the beginning. And the longer you spend on it, and the more you work on it, and the more you unravel the mystery, the easier it becomes to understand how it all fits together. And so from now on, from this point on, it really is, the journey has speeded up a lot.
Now, what I can't help but be curious about, because I know that Inky had a brother Inwell, is how were you able to determine this to be Inky civilization rather than Inwell's? I mean, yes, Inky did some gold mining, but didn't Inwell also do some gold mining, or do you think this was at a time before they separated?
No, it's very clear in the translations that Enki was the guy that established the gold mining operations in what they refer to as the Abzu. And we've identified that to be Southern Africa. South Africa, Zimbabwe, large parts of Botswana, large parts of Mozambique. And then the story gets even more beautiful and more mysterious. And you realize that we're dealing with a conspiracy that's been going on for thousands of years. You see, I mean, you know this voice. Everything is connected, right? Everything is interwoven. So the effects that we're experiencing on Earth today are the effects of people's misery, the whole monetary system that is totally crippling the people of the world, the legal system that is completely unlawful and is defrauding people from their birthright and
on a daily basis, the medical system at all.
Exactly.
All sides of the common source.
Yeah, and it all goes back to the Sumerians. And then you start looking for clues. Why does it all point in that direction? And then when you look at the translations in the Sumerian tablets, and it tells you that it is after the flood. And once again, the Sumerian tablets are very, very clear, especially the King's Lists. The King's Lists are probably the key arguable sources of Sumerian information that tell us that what they wrote down was accurate and not just made up garbage. And the King's List, there's several of them, but there are two of them that are virtually identical with the names of the kings, the period that they ruled, 222,000 years, and they ruled before the flood. So you realize that we're dealing with something here that was so long ago, and then there was a global event that every ancient culture of civilization talks about, is the flood. And then it tells us, after the flood, when the kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and the rules for heaven and earth were established and set up by Enlil and Enki, life continued. And civilizations and cities were built and civilizations were established across the world. And you go, okay, hold on. This is where it started. It's only after the flood that we see the imposition of these draconian rules and the legal and the financial systems that we are suffering under today. It goes back 6,000 years to the Sumerians. And for the people that are involved in the free man movement, the whole sovereign man movement, that that you have that you're the living, breathing human being, but you also have a legal fiction or a straw man that's created by the government, and this whole realization, when that penny drops for you, you realize that that's how far back it goes. This is not something that was created the other day or a few hundred years ago. This is something that goes back thousands of years. It's spectacular in its deception.
Right. Now, I noticed that I heard you use the word draconian, which I didn't quite see coming, but I am familiar with the word, and I do know that these are supposed to originate from a planet in the Draco system, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, why do you think we have the English word or the word the draconian rule? It comes back from all those years ago.
Which we also have the term dragon in the Bible, which also goes back to the term draconius.
Yeah, exactly. And then you start realizing how we use words in the languages that we speak that refer to all these things, that refer to our true history, the hidden history. But we're not aware of it because we've been to our true history, the hidden history. But we're not aware of it because we've been dumbed down. We've been manipulated for thousands of years. We've been led into a state of amnesia, so we don't really know anything about our human history. I like to show people in my presentation with a little mathematical formula how little we know about our human origins. And it's spectacular. Any 6-year-old student can do this as long as you can count and divide. if you just start with 6,000 years ago and the Sumerian tablets, and you lose 50% of information every time you have a conflict, because remember, we're told that history is written by the victors, and that's exactly what it is. Not only is it written by the victors, but it's manipulated, it's skewed, and it's changed, and it's rewritten. So we probably know very little about the actual truth, what was going on after the event, because it's been so badly distorted by those that rewrite history. So if you just do the numbers and you lose 50% of information every time there's a conflict, by the time you reach 120 years, that's all you need, 120 wars, 124 conflicts, and you already know, or we already know, less than is permissible by the laws of physics about our human history. Now that's a spectacular discovery to make. 124 events in 6,000 years since the launch of the Sumerian civilization, or the rise of the Sumerians, when they started writing the human history. Since then, only 124 years into their civilization, we already know less about our human history than is permissible by the laws of physics. And
they started destroying the information right smack after the flood. They didn't wait.
Exactly. And so, if we think we know anything, it's just our ego speaking and our arrogance, and it's not a living, breathing human being who is of a conscious mind who wants to expand his consciousness, but is happy to stay in dogma and remain a slave marching soldier.
Right. Which I know I could tell anybody that was listening to me, if I was to say it to them, for anyone who really thinks that information has not been hidden from us, you better go back and look at the book burnings that the church did at Alexandria, not to mention the other times. I mean, every time one country took over another country, they were destroying the information about their religion, some of their history. They were recreating the history and, all kinds of things. This has been a common practice. And then if you look at the fact that ancient texts are still being unburied, why are they being unburied? Because they had to be hidden to preserve them, because if they were left out in the open, they would have been destroyed as well.
Exactly. So look at what the Spaniards under the guidance of the Pope did to the Native Americans and the Mayas. It's disgusting. It is just absolutely, those are crimes against humanity.
Now, I've had a listener coming a little late that was asking what was here before. Well, let me just go back up to his question. There's been some chat before that because he accidentally got dropped out of the chat room for a second. He wants me to ask what was before the Sumerians, also the Epic of Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh. So I know he come in late, so he didn't hear where we've gotten this far, so I thought maybe you could bring the people that's just now getting here up to speed.
Yeah, look, when you're talking about the Epic of Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, those are Sumerian versions of historic events, and before that was a vanished civilization that we've uncovered in southern Africa that pretty much covers most of South Africa, most of Zimbabwe, large parts of Botswana and Mozambique, which is a gold mining civilization. They were mining gold, not only gold, also many other minerals, but predominantly gold. It's what the Sumerian tablets refer to as the Abzu, and by a slow process of elimination, we found out that by reverse engineering the clues, we identified the Abzu to be here in southern Africa and nowhere else, not in Ethiopia or in India or in Saudi Arabia. Many people have had all kinds of suggestions as to where the Abzu is, but it's very clearly the Abzu is where the gold came from. I mean, I'll read you an excerpt from translations right here. I was actually just putting it into my presentation. It says here, where dry land from dry land apart was torn, Earth's innards were revealed. Where the land mass, the shape of a heart was given, in the lower parts thereof, golden veins from Earth's innards were abundant. Abzu, of gold's the birthplace, Ea or Enki, to the region the name gave. So when he discovered that this was the richest place in gold on Earth, he called it the Abzu. and from then he was referred to the Abzu, and often the deep Abzu. The further south you went, they referred to it as the deep Abzu. So when they referred to the deep Abzu, they're probably talking about what today would be South Africa, and when they're just referring to the Abzu, they might be referring to slightly more north, just across the border from us in Zimbabwe. And this is spectacular stuff, because we're not just talking about a few gold mines here. We're talking about millions of gold mines that we have uncovered. And we do this by a process of extrapolation, because we have uncovered about 75,000 gold mines, physically counted, about 75,000 gold mines. That was done here in South Africa from 2005. They started counting, and they were counting for about 5 years, all these mines that are still visible in one specific area, which is not a big area. It's about 100 by 100 kilometers. And in there they counted 75,000 gold mines. At that point they stopped counting because they realized it wasn't going to be feasible to do what they intended to do, and their intention was to close up all the entrances to these gold mines to prevent illegal gold mining by, average Joe Schmo off the street, or homeless people, or whatever you want to call them. So we basically, by extrapolation, we can say that if there are 75,000 gold mines in this one area, which is a very rich area of stone circles, the ancient stone ruins that we find here, there must be well over 1 million gold mines scattered throughout southern Africa.
So this here is going to be an ongoing project. How many, out of these gold mines, are y'all finding anything in the gold mines that tell anything of a story?
Not at this stage, but what I can tell you is that the big mining companies obviously have very secret documents that they keep, and I have it from the man himself, the chief geologist for Anglo American, the big mining company that was started by Sir John Rhodes down here. Well, he was the guy responsible for it, and the De Beers guy took over, and it was for a long time it was the biggest mining company in the world, and the richest gold company and platinum, and I've heard it from over a beer in a pub, believe it or not, of all places, from the chief geologist from Anglo American, who told me that they got a secret file at head office that keeps all the information regarding any ancient mines that they come across. And the instructions are, if you come across any ancient gold mine that you don't know anything about, if there are any remains or any tools or artifacts, anything that could be problematic for us, okay, to prevent us from mining it, just cover it up. Close it up, fill it up with soil, cover it up. And he told me that they've got a folder that is filled with these examples of ancient gold mines that they've come across, that they just found human remains in, they found tools and artifacts and all kinds of things, and they just cover it up.
Okay, now Bill was also asking if the creation story is older than the epics, like the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Epic of Atrahasis. When he says creation story, I guess he means the Bible. He wants to know if that predates them.
No, the Bible is pretty much an edited version of much of the Sumerian information. But at the same time, I must tell you that the Bible is deeply encoded with ancient knowledge and advanced knowledge and mysterious advanced information, deeply encoded. You've got to look beyond the stories, the surface stories, the human drama and all that rubbish. You've got to look at the subtext. What is it actually telling us? And it's encoded in what it says, the words they use. It's encoded in the verse in which it appears. It's encoded in the number of verses in a specific larger segment. It's encoded in I'll give you an example. The Book of Revelations has got 22 tarot cards, 22 chapters or verses, and those 22 verses are directly linked to the 22 tarot cards of the major arcana. And therefore the Book of Revelations has got incredible information that is encoded or filled with ancient knowledge and advanced knowledge of sacred geometry and the laws of nature and the divine nature of our universe and so forth, and nothing to do with some sort of vengeful God that's going to send brimstone and lightning and hell from the skies above. It's got nothing to do with that.
I think largely at the time that Revelation was written, it was written by John on Patmos, and, well, I mean, if he just come out and wrote it out in any kind of deal, they would just burn it and thrown it away, and, the public would have never gotten it as it is. Revelation almost didn't make it into our Bible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a very important reason why it probably did make it into the Bible. I'm not quite sure who decided to put it in, but the fact that it's in there is highly indicative of the message that actually comes out of the Bible. It has a huge amount of information that it gives us. I mean, just in terms of Genesis, okay, it's in Genesis 3 that God says, "Let there be light," and that's not an accident. That is precisely calculated. That it happens in Genesis 3. And once you start getting into the numeric science of these things, and I'm not talking about numerology, I'm talking about numeric science, an advanced way of decoding and understanding what these guys are doing with the numbers. And that's what I'm doing with a brilliant scientist called Bill Swat here in Johannesburg. And we'll be releasing the book in hopefully still this year, I call The Secret Numbers of God, that finally exposes this incredible wealth of knowledge and information that is encoded in all these ancient scriptures and ancient texts, specifically the Bible and many other ancient texts. But the Bible is definitely the one that is mysteriously filled with huge amounts of knowledge and information.
Which makes you have to wonder, why was it chosen out of all the other texts? It's like somebody thousands of years ago in the days of Moses knew that eventually that would be the one that would, be mainstreamed, in other words.
Well, remember that the Bible was manipulated in 325, 326.
Yes, Constantine.
And that's where it was really put together, the New Testament, and they messed with it and decided what was going to stay in it, what wasn't going to stay in it, and then the Old Testament, if I understand it correctly, was only added much later to that. Constantine was mainly dealing with the New Testament, and then the Old Testament was, the Bible as we know it today took a few more hundred years to put together. So, and it was put together by men with agendas, and men with hidden agendas that we have no idea what the agendas were. However, clearly some of them had an agenda to encode this information and the secret knowledge into the Bible, despite its gross manipulation by Constantine. And that's really spectacular if you think about it, that it escaped the butchery and the editing by Constantine and is still deeply encoded. So somebody after Constantine must have had this advanced knowledge and information and a way to put it in there.
Yeah, it had to be.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I heard that Sir Francis Bacon had a part in 1611 with Francis Bacon had a part in 1611 with King Stewart and recreating the King James Bible, or in the original creation. And he's known for being a Freemason. It's possible that he might have had a hand in it.
Yeah, I think by that time it was already the form and the information was already in there. I think if you look at the Bible, the Bibles that came before him, I'm actually a little bit a little bit fuzzy on when the first Bible, as we know, that's the Gutenberg Bible, but I forget what year. It's 14 something that it was.
Yeah, I think it was 1460, but don't quote me. I'm not real good with dates, but that sounds right.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the late 1400s, the Gutenberg Bible came out, and that was pretty much then the way that it's been reprinted, with different versions coming in every now and then, different words being used, replaced by more modern words and other words. But even that, I tell you, there's some very strange things going on in the Bible. It's spectacular. But I must tell you that whoever wrote, or whoever put together the tarot cards, the 22 major arcana tarot cards, had all the knowledge and all the information of the universe, the nature of reality, the face of God, the mind of God. They understood exactly how the divine functions and how it manifests itself in this projected reality we call the universe. It is a spectacular sight to behold once you start to understand what the tarot cards tell us. And it's got nothing to do with the numerology or the very low-level sort of fortune-telling function that many people see it as. It's way beyond that. It is encoded with all the knowledge of the universe that we could possibly imagine.
Yeah, and a lot of people are not really aware of that because so many people read everything, straight on face value, and a lot of people don't even read it. They just go to church and listen to what the preacher says about it. And well, I've been to churches, and that's a very, very shallow reading of it. Not to be negative, but I mean, you can tell there's no in-depth understanding, though.
Of course not. That's why the Bible was structured like that, and the Quran is the same thing. The Judeo-Christian religions, it's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those three all come from the same source. They all come from Abraham, and they all have exactly the same agenda: to totally and utterly enslave people, indoctrinate them with false prophets, with misinformation and disinformation, make them believe that they're under attack by God, and turn God into a vengeful, bloodthirsty humanoid who is obsessed with revenge against people in some weird and twisted way. And that's exactly the opposite of what we find when you start getting into the deeper meanings that are encoded in the Bible, and the messages of Christ and the Christ consciousness that is rising through a lot of the sort of New Age societies today, and the spiritual movements and the explosion of consciousness. And suddenly we start seeing the true meanings and the true messages of Christ that are ringing very loudly and very true. And they do one thing with humans, and they resonate with people. And that word resonate is very, very important, because it is resonance that is the key it's the glue of the universe that holds the universe together. The whole universe resonates, vibrates together as one. And it is that unity that from which all things come. And it's out of that unity that we have been separated and segregated into a confused and divided species that is at odds with each other, because we have been completely disinformed and confused over thousands of years about who we are, that we all come from the same source, that we all come from exactly the same seed. Even the Quran tells us this, but if you misread it, you misunderstand it.
Right.
These are spectacular stories, I tell you. And
I agree.
What is fascinating to us is that all of that stuff is now so much easier to understand and allow us to formulate a much better understanding of these very early and first civilizations in South Africa and Southern Africa, of these early people that were very, very, very shallow and empty consciously and spiritually. But they were the foundation of what we are today. So it's beautiful how it all fits together.
Okay, now Emily was asking in the chat room if you had a preferred deck of tarot that you'd recommend to people.
I take my lead on this from my good friend Willem de Swart, who's the guy who's doing the main research on this and doing all the breakthrough, and he's the guy that's being channeled with information and decoding it. I believe he mentioned that Aleister Crowley's tarot card deck is really interesting, but that's all I'm going to say. I don't know. The older the cards, let me put it this way, the older the cards, the better they are. So try and find a deck of cards that's really old, that hasn't been messed with or changed. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to let you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't know you worked for it.
The important thing, I just wanted to add to that. The important thing to remember about the tarot cards is that they all are based on ratios, and the ratios are the card and the number of the number of the card and the card that it is in the deck. Because the first card's number is 0, the second card number is 1. Okay, so there are 22 cards, but the 22nd card's number is 21. Okay, so the last card in the deck is its number is 21 over 22, 21 upon 22. And in that ratio lies all the knowledge and information and the meaning. And if you start looking at that and applying that to the tarot cards, you'll start seeing a huge amount of information that just jumps out at you.
Okay, what I was going to mention a minute ago is we got like 6 minutes remaining. I want you to have time to tell everybody about the upcoming events you got. I know you mentioned you have these, this tour that you're on right now. I don't think you mentioned exactly what part of it you're on right now. I think you're still in Canada, but you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But before we do, I want to remind everybody that your main website, where you can get most of the information about his tour, his books, and everything, is www.zuluplanet.com. That's ZULUPLANET.com. And he's got all the information you could possibly want about his books, about his discoveries, and his tours and everything. But I'm going to let him brief y'all real quick also. You want to let everybody know what you got coming up?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. We're leaving South Africa in a few days' time, and we're starting the tour in New York on Friday the 6th, which is this coming Friday. Then we're moving on to Washington, D.C., and from then all the way down the coast, we're doing 29 cities in the USA, 2 of which are 27 in the USA and 2 in Canada, Montreal and Vancouver. And it's a journey of 2.5 months. The full itinerary and the schedule and the cities and venues, addresses are on my website. Just go to ZuluPlanet.com, click on the banner for the USA tour, and it'll take you to the page with all the information. Or if you want, you can go directly to the blog spot that we've created, and that is michaeltellinger.blogspot.com. And come and see me at one of the venues close to you. It's a spectacular journey. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. The visual impact of these discoveries, and when you realize how it all fits together and how these ancients knew everything about sound, frequency, and energy, and how much energy they were generating, is absolutely spectacular. So,
I think they also, sorry, I was just going to say, I think they also knew about magnetic energy. This is how they move their great boulders, in other words. Am I right?
Yeah, I think magnetic energy is part of it, but I think it actually goes beyond that. It goes even beyond magnetic energy. It just goes into frequency and sound. And magnetic energy would be an aspect of that because we're dealing with electromagnetic fields in any case. But I think they actually understood a higher form of energy. The same way I think that Nikola Tesla discovered that very few people are aware of is radiant energy that is not anything like that we know of today. I think this is what they used, close to 300,000 years ago already. And that's huge because we are now what many prophets say, the end days will be as the first days, and as above, so below. And the more research you do into into this field of knowledge and information and human history, you realize very quickly that's exactly what it is. We're dealing with the fractal nature of not only the fractal nature of the universe and the fractal nature of reality, but the fractal nature of time and the cycles that follow, the rise and fall of knowledge and civilizations. And we're experiencing one of those right now, the rapid rise of consciousness that will hopefully be followed by a long period of advanced knowledge and information, and explosion of knowledge and information and consciousness that moves us back to unity, after which it starts to decline again. And I guess, based on the physical universe that we find ourselves in, it's got everything to do with where our solar system sits in the galactic plane and how close we are to the golden thread of knowledge and consciousness that is scattered throughout the core of the galactic plane.
Okay. Now, during the remaining 2 minutes, do you want to share any last-minute thoughts you have with the audience?
Yeah. What we think about our human history is far removed from what really happened. The history of this planet is a lot stranger than most people could possibly dream of in their wildest dreams. And that's an exciting thing, because it's like, watching a new movie. If we thought we knew this movie from our history books and our schooling, our indoctrination, suddenly you realize that there's a whole new movie that we can go and watch and absorb. And it's a never-ending movie. It is for the rest of our lives, we're going to be watching this movie and absorbing this new information that starts to come to us as part of this consciousness explosion. So enjoy the ride. Do not fear any of these doomsday prophets. That is the negative side of the energetic field, and that is absolutely unnecessary. We are living, breathing, sentient beings that manifest our reality through our thoughts. It's very important to know this and realize it, that our collective consciousness actually allows us to manifest our future. So if we start to present and project a positive, conscious, peaceful, united or unified outcome and the world where we all live in utopian harmony, then that's the world we're going to find ourselves in. If we are victims of those that keep giving us the bad news, then there's a good chance that we might get ourselves involved in that. But then there's still an opportunity, a possibility that both might happen. Like in Revelations it says, there were 2 men in the field and suddenly one was gone, or one will be gone, which means that we might be exposed to a frequency separation where you cluster certain frequencies together, or frequencies of consciousness together, and another group of frequencies of consciousness together, just like television channels. If you're watching CBS, you have no idea that NBC exists. Your reality is with CBS. And yet there could be multiple levels of consciousness that coexist in the same space.
Yeah, just like TV channels do.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, Michael, I got to tell you. Oh, sorry, I have a bad habit. When you're talking to somebody on the phone, you can't see them. It's hard not to accidentally step on them, and I do apologize for that. Are you?
Not at all.
Okay, yeah, you're still with me. I thought I lost you for a minute. But, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming onto the air. It just now quit streaming while I was apologizing, in fact. It's been wonderful talking to you. You really shared a lot of great information. And I got Bill in the chat room that wants to make sure I post this in his ancient mystery thing over there. So, yeah, I think you're going to get a lot of hits to your website behind this. And